Welcome to chapter 32, the book of Deuteronomy. We finally arrive at the actual ode that Moses writes. And it begins, "Take heed, Urane, O heaven, and I will speak. Take heed, O heaven, and hear, O O earth, the discourses from my mouth." So he is speaking, as I see it, more than just to the Jews. He's speaking to, I believe, everyone that is reading, that knows God. It's, O heaven and earth. He doesn't say Israel. So his audience is everyone, including us today. We can glean a lot out of this chapter. So what does he have to say? "Expect my maxims as iatos, rain, hyatal, comes from that, and let my discourses go down as dew." Rain and dew, covering, wetting everything, as a heavy shower upon wild grass and as snowflakes upon grass. Let it cover you and take it all in, because it's completely covering you, the words that Moses has to say to everyone. "For I called the name of the Lord, Kyriou." Give greatness to our God, in the imperative. God. His works are true, and all his ways are equity. God is true. Everything that he does is true, and Jesus told Pilate that he was the truth, and Pilate, what is truth? And so many people lie. It was common, I guess, for Pontius Pilate to hear lies, for somebody to say truth, like it didn't mean a whole lot. But with God, everything is true. He doesn't lie. And all his ways are equity. They're the right way of doing things. His ways are. He doesn't find wrong ways to do things like man does. God has control, and his ways are the ones that are correct. God is trustworthy, and there is not an injustice in him. God is trustworthy. If you understand who God is and how he has worked in your life, you see that he is trustworthy. But if you don't know God, then you wouldn't understand the trustworthiness of God. God has went through thick and thin with me, a lot of tough times, and he's trustworthy. I trust him more than anything else, any human. There is not an injustice in him, adhikia. It's also, the word can be unrighteousness. There is not unrighteousness in him, can go both ways. I might change them to agree in the next third edition. But it says in John 7:18, Jesus says, "The one speaking from himself seeks his own glory. But the one seeking the glory of the one having sent him," that is Jesus, "this one is true, and unrighteousness or injustice, adhikia, is not in him," just as it says right here, John 7:18. Just and sacred is the Lord, sacred, holy, separated from sin. But they sinned. They are not his children, whoever is the one that is sinning. They're not a child of God. Now, is the sinning, as far as they're not his children, I mean, we all sin. Everybody falls short of the glory of God. and that does not make them not his children. But the sin that Israel commits with idolatry and walking away is way different than just sinning and doing something that's wrong. They're one scoffing, a crooked generation, one turning aside. And we see in Matthew 17:17 it says, O unbelieving and perverted generation. That's the same word as crooked. Crooked or perverted. Until when shall I be with you? Jesus says in Matthew 17:17. And then Peter mentions, Peter does in Acts 2:40. He says, be delivered from this crooked generation. Then that was when Peter was talking and 3,000 people were added to the church. Paul in Philippians 2:14 says, do all things without grumblings and arguings, that you should become blameless and unmixed, children of God, without blemish, in the midst of a generation crooked and perverted or turning aside, among whom you appear as luminaries in the world. So this crooked generation goes a long time. It's not only the generation that is at the time of Moses, but it appears throughout all times. A crooked generation. These people, they die, they come and they go, but that generation, the crooked generation, continues on through. And this is exactly sort of what it's talking about here. And one turning aside, and that's the perverting. In the New Testament, another word I might change and try to have them agree in the two. Do you recompense these things to the Lord thus, O people, moronish and foolish and not wise? Is this what you're going to do when God comes into your life? Recompense him by walking away, sinning, and doing things that you know you shouldn't be doing without any sorrow or repentance? Oh, did he not acquire you, this your father, in the parentheses, and make you and shape you? Yeah, God did. He made us out of the dirt of the ground, and Adam, and now we are shaped and made by God. It's not an accident. And if he has done this, if he has made you, he's made me, and he shaped us, I believe it's for a purpose. It's not just a willy-nilly thing. Oops, I'm going to make a Joe Blow, and whatever he does, and No, I think that he acquires us, an acquiring, an ownership that he can do what he wants in our life. Now, if you don't want God as your father, it's interesting here, this your father. So we see the Father appearing where Jesus says he came from the Father, and he goes back to the Father. The Father gives him the words to speak and the power and so forth. And the Father here is in the Old Testament also. The Ruah is the Hebrew word, I believe, for the Holy Spirit. And then in Daniel, the 3 men in the fiery furnace, Nebuchadnezzar went in the next day and looks down, and he says, didn't we throw 3 of them in there? How come I see 4, and the 4th looks like Son of God? And that's in Daniel. Remember days of the eon. Go back and remember. Perceive indeed the years of the generations of generations. Ask your father, and he will announce to you. Now, I don't believe that's he's talking about their physical father. Your elders, and they shall speak to you. They're going to tell you, hopefully. When the highest divided nations into parts, as he disseminated sons of Adam, he set borders of nations according to the number of angels of God. Now, I don't think there's any place else that says this, that the nations were according to the number of angels of God. Well, we know there's tens of thousands of angels, so because Jesus says that he could call legions of angels, so exactly what it's talking about here, I guess I'll have to wait and ask when we get to heaven. Somehow, now it could be messengers of God, but it is what it is, as angels or angelos, which could be either one. His people, Jacob, which became Israel, became a portion for the Lord. Israel is a piece of measured out land of his inheritance. His people Jacob, and Jacob was a person who was renamed Israel. And Israel became a nation, and it says right here that Israel is a piece of measured out land. And it is still a piece of measured out land today, bordering the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea. He sufficed him in a wilderness land. Israel, Jacob actually are the people, in thirst of sweltering heat in a waterless land when the people went through the desert, the wilderness. He encircled him, which he did, he went around, and corrected him and guarded him as a pupil of an eye. And guarding him as a pupil of an eye, the pupil is right here, and you guard your eyesight. You don't want to see anything stuck into it, and so you really guard your eye. You probably do it unconsciously, but we do. We watch out so we don't hit our eye. It's the last thing we want to do, and this is what God does with us. As an eagle sheltering his nest, and over his young he longs after, well, thrusting out his wings, he receives them and takes them upon his upper back. So we are taken by God, and here is a figure of the eagle of taking the people of his on his upper back to teach them and so forth. The Lord alone led them, and there was not with them an alien God. When they went through the wilderness, they didn't have idols yet. He brought them, except for the idol of the golden calf, but basically then they went through, he was the main force, the main God, power. He brought them unto the strength of the land where they are now, as he's speaking this. He fed them produce of fields, gave them foods. They nursed honey from out of a rock, and olive oil from out of solid rock. Well, I looked all over, and there's no place I could see where it says anything about honey from a rock or olive oil from a solid rock. But I did find something that was interesting, and that's in 1 Corinthians 10:4. It says, "And all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from out of a spiritual rock following, and the rock was the Christ." So here, this obviously Moses is writing, and I believe he's talking about Christ, because I couldn't find any place there was no honey out of the rock, or olive oil grows on a tree, and the honey in beehives. Butter of oxen and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and rams, offspring of bulls, and he goes with fat of kidneys of wheat, and kidneys, as we see down here, is kernels, a shape. And they drank wine, the blood of the grape, the figure, reddish. And Jacob ate and was filled up, even the one being loved, kicked up. He was fattened, he was thickened, he was widened, and he abandoned God. Now, Jesus says in Luke 2:11, and he abandoned God, the one making, and he left from God his deliverer. In Luke 2:11 it says, "For was born to you today a deliverer, who is Christ the Lord," Kyrios, same as the Old Testament Kyrios, "in the city of David," Bethlehem. And then in Titus 2:13, Paul says, "Awaiting the blessed hope and grandeur of the glory of the great God and our deliverer, Jesus Christ." So here he left from God his deliverer, which the Jews did. They left from Jesus. And they also left before that. Then in Titus 3:6, "of which he poured out upon us richly through Jesus Christ, our deliverer." And then in Peter, he mentions the Lord and deliverer Jesus Christ 4 times. So basically, as I see it, Lord, God, deliverer are all the same. And they left from God the deliverer, his deliverer, Israel. "They provoked me over alien ones," people that were there that they went after Baal's, Baal's, not Zippor, was Baal-Fagor, and their sexual rights and so forth. "In their abominations they greatly embittered me. They sacrificed to demons and not to gods in whom they knew not." Now he could also be talking about the future and seeing what they are going to do, and they have done, and this is exactly what they do. They sacrifice their children to Molech in the valley of Hinnom, southern valley right next to Jerusalem, to the wall. "New and newly made gods have come, in whom their fathers knew not." God, the one creating you abandoned. Now, they can abandon God. Now, I believe Christians can abandon God anytime they want. We have a free will to do that, just as the Jews. We are not robots that God has forces us, once we say the sinner's prayer or something, that's a ticket to heaven. I don't see that at all. In the Bible, so many places of warning of leaving God. And you forgot God, the one maintaining you. You even forgot about him. When King Josiah, I think it was, when he had the temple being cleaned, and they brought to him the Torah. And he didn't know anything about all these laws, and he had them read, and he tore his coat, and then had this Torah reinstituted, and the Passover, and all sorts of things. So they forgot God, who was maintaining them, doing the things for them. "And the Lord beheld, and he was jealous. And he was provoked to anger by their sons and daughters." Now, this hasn't happened yet, so it's basically he's talking about the future, the portent of the future. "And he said, God, I will turn my face from them, and I will show what will be to them at the last times." So now we see the last times mentioned. It was last days in the last chapter. So the last times, and they haven't hit yet because we're still going, and Israel's a nation. The last times have not happened. But what's going to happen? "For it is a generation being distorted, sons in whom there is not belief in them." And there are many Jews in Israel and throughout the world who don't believe in God, and they certainly don't believe in Christ. They're antichrists. Now there are the ones that have went and repented and have come to the Lord Jesus Christ, that are Jews, and but this is not what he's talking about. Anybody can change one way or the other. I think they have a free will to do that. "They provoked me to jealousy over that which is not God. They provoked me to anger by their idols." So now the idolatry just gets worse and worse and worse as we go through the kings, all the way until the end of the Jewish people as they're taken to Babylon. But he says, I will provoke them to jealousy over that not a nation. By a senseless nation, I will provoke them to jealousy. I will provoke them to anger. I'm sorry. This first part, I will provoke them to jealousy over that not a nation, is basically mentions that in Romans 10:19. Paul says, but I say, did not Israel know? First, Moses said, and he quotes this, I will provoke you to jealousy over that not a nation, us, the Christians, by a senseless nation, and I will provoke you to anger. And so we see the Christians have, or provoke, we say, well, I have your Messiah, and that would just infuriate them. It happened to one woman who was a writer in politics, and she went on to a talk show which was run by a Jewish man, and she mentioned how that, with Jesus they become a fulfilled Jew, and he was just incensed in anger over that. But yet, basically, that's exactly correct. Then in Romans 11:11 it says, but in their transgression the deliverance came to the nations for the provoking them to jealousy. Now, God had it planned. Now, I don't think he purposely wanted the people to fall so that the Christians and the nations would become believers, but this is what did happen. In Romans 11:14 it says, if by any means I should provoke to jealousy the ones of my flesh, and shall deliver some from out of them. So the provoking to jealousy, I don't argue with Jews. I find it be better to do exactly what God says, to provoke them to jealousy by saying that, well, Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He's done all these things, fulfilled the law. You can still, he's the sacrifice that God accepts, and all these. So once you start bringing in all the things in the New Testament for Jesus, and you're telling a Jew that, boy, would they'll provoke them to anger for sure, and hopefully jealousy, and that it would lead to a repentance, but not always. For a fire burns away from out of my rage, God says, and the rage is Gehenna, was a fire that burned in the valley of Hinnom, and Jesus talks about where the fire is not quenched, and it continues in Hades. It shall be burned unto lower Hades, this fire. It shall devour the land and its produce. It shall blaze on the foundation of mountains. And exactly what this is referring to, this fire, we haven't seen it yet. And when if we were there, I'm sure we would know that this is what it is. Hopefully, we will not be around. And then he says, I bring together to them bad things, and by my arrows I will finish with them. Now, this is all the ode of Moses saying all these things. But I looked all over the internet, and I couldn't find any place where the Jews read this ode. They're all into the Torah. Oh, Torah, Torah, Torah. Read the Torah, study the Torah, and all this, and you see everything. But when you get to the 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy, nothing. I don't see anything where they read this or anything, and I was no wonder they don't, because it puts them to shame, and if they read it and seen all these things. So God says, I bring to them bad things, and by my arrows I will finish with them, kill them, melting them away in hunger and being food for fowls, and affected incurable. I look at the Jews as pretty much today as incurable. They are not going to accept Jesus Christ. A few, maybe, yes. The teeth of wild beasts I will send as a successor to them, to all these other things. While that's interesting, the therion, the wild beast, in the beasts in the book of Revelation, it talks about them. The beast from the sea and the beast from the land, with rage dragging them upon the ground. From outside The sword shall make them childless, which Revelation talks about. 1/3 of the earth is destroyed by the sword. Excuse me. And from out of the inner chambers, phobos, fear. Whenever you have this phobe, it's something to do with fear. The young man with the partheno, the virgin, the one nursing being placed with the old man. It's going to happen to them all, to the virgin and one's nursing and the old man. They're all going to be taken captive, basically, into Babylon, and then later the Romans will scatter them throughout the world. I said, I will disperse. Oh, what happened here? I will disperse lost the link. I will disperse them, and I will cause their memorial to cease from among men. Now the Jews, the memorial of the righteousness, this was sort of lost for 2,000 years, and they were scattered. If not on account of the anger of the enemies, then no way should they live a long time, if not on account of the anger of the enemies. Now, is this talking about Israel, or is it talking about the enemies? It says that they should live a long time, and that in no way their opponents join in making attack, lest they should say, our high hand and not the Lord did these things. So basically, it's talking here is about Israel, saying that our hand did these things. I see that today with the president, or whatever you call it, of Israel, and the military is what they are hoping upon, not the Lord. Maybe some of them are, but he did mention that when he was in the United Nations. And when we think that we did it, not God, then then God does not like that. When we take the glory, and we've seen this many places in the Bible, where people took the glory and God punished them. For it is a nation-destroying counsel, and I think he's talking about Israel, not the enemy. And there is not in them higher knowledge, is not higher knowledge any longer. If they don't follow the things of God, then they are walking in their own strength. They did not think to perceive. Let them appreciate in the coming time. Hopefully, it's talking here a portent of a coming time at the end, that they will appreciate God and Jesus Christ. How shall one pursue thousands and two rout 10,000s unless God rendered them up and the Lord delivered them up? Yeah, it's only by God. God does these miracles. For their gods are not as our God, but our enemies are unthinking. Now he is talking about the enemies, bringing them in. For the grapevine of Sodom is their grapevine. Now, is that there? Here in 32, is that Israel, or is that the enemies? If it's Israel, then Sodom is their grapevine, and we see in the book of Revelation, the Sodom is, I believe, Jerusalem. And their small branch vine is from out of Gomorrah. Their grape is the grape of bile. Their cluster is bitterness to them. The rage of dragons is their wine, even the incurable rage of asps, poisonous. Everything about the Jews is poisonous and bitterness, and because they don't have the things of God. They don't have the sacrifices. They don't have the temple. They don't have the Levitical priesthood, none of these things. Behold, are not these things brought together by me, and to set seal among my treasures? God is the one doing these things. And we talk about seals in the book of Revelation again. And a day of punishment I shall recompense. in a time whenever their foot should trip. And I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar and then the Romans. For the day of their destruction is near, and at hand prepared for you. So all these things Moses is bringing out is going to happen. So I could see where the Jews today wouldn't want to read this, because they know this is a possibility still. For the Lord judges his people, and over his bondmen he shall be comforted. So now we go and changes to the good things of God. He judges his people, but over his bondmen. Now, the bondmen are the people that believe him, not just a Jew. Jesus says that they said that we were Father Abraham, and he said that he could bring the Jews from out of the bricks that they were walking on to become children of Abraham. So the bondman of God, he shall be comforted, for he beheld their being disabled and failing in the hostile invasion, and were weakened. So God has blessed them today. The Jews have come back to Israel, and they apparently it's talking about this invasion, and they were weakened. This is what I see. God has brought them back, and they're not in really great shape, and weakened. And the Lord said, where are their gods upon whom they yielded upon them? The gods of Israel today do not have idols, but yet they yield upon other things than God. Money and power, military, secret weapons maybe, atom bombs, so things like that. Of whom the fat of their sacrifices you ate. Oh. I don't know why the links aren't working. But and drank the wine of their libations. Let them rise up and give help to you. That is those idols that they made all the time during all the kings. If you're going to bow down to the idols, and when you need help, then let's see if your idol is going to help you. You drank the wine, ate the food. Look at today. What do people in my country, what do they rely upon? The government. And we take the things of the government, Social Security, and all sorts of things. But when it all falls apart, either politically or a natural disaster like an asteroid hitting, which it mentions in Revelation, then who's going to help you? If the government's gone, then how are you going to get any help? Go to your senator after the world is 1/3 is destroyed, 1/3 of mankind. Go to your senator and tell him, hey, this is terrible. Why don't you do something about it? Well, you can't. Let them rise up and give help to you and be to you a shelterer. Well, good luck. Good luck in getting the government to do that. Behold that I am, and there is not a God besides me. God is the one. I shall kill, and I shall make to live. I shall strike, and I will heal. And there is not one who shall rescue from out of my hands. God is in control. A lot of people think that they are in control, but you can't control your own body. If you get sick, all sorts of things can happen. Really not in control, but people like to think that they do have control. Pride. For I shall lift my hand into the heaven, and I shall swear by an oath by my right hand, and I will say, I live into the eon. God is forever and ever. Eternal is the Latin word for the aeona, eternal. For I will sharpen my sword as lightning, and that's another place in Revelation talking about the sword. And my hand will hold to equity. He's going to do the righteous thing. And I will recompense punishment against the enemies, and against the ones detesting me I will recompense. Who are the enemies of God? The Jews that do not believe in Jesus Christ or God, unbelievers who do not know but reject the God when they hear, and deserting Christians who have walked away from God. These are all the enemies of God. Detesting, and the ones detesting. It says in Luke 19:14, Jesus was giving the parable to the people, and his citizens detested him, that was the king, and sent an embassy after him, saying, "We do not want this one to reign over us." And this was a parable relating to God and sending his son and people and so forth, the different prophets over the periods, thousands of years. But his citizens detested him, Jesus says. Jesus saw the ones detesting. And against the ones detesting, I will recompense. God will recompense the ones that have rejected Jesus. Here he is talking about the Jews. And then it says in John 15:23, the one detesting me even detests my Father. So detesting Jesus is detesting the Father that Abraham is talking about right here in this chapter. Quite a condemnation. And I shall intoxicate my arrows of blood. They will, the figure of speech, the arrows will have blood all over them by killing people. And my sword shall eat meats from the blood of the slain, death, war, and from the captivity of the heads of the rulers of the enemies. Be glad, O heavens, together with him, and do obeisance to him, all angels of God. In Hebrews 1:6, it talks about angels doing obeisance to Jesus. And it was a quote here, and angels, and do obeisance to him, to God. And Hebrews 1:6 says this is to Jesus. The angels did obeisance to Jesus. Be glad, O nations, with his people. So it includes the nations here, and that's was quoted by Paul in Romans 15:10 with the inclusion of the nations. The nations be glad, which is we are the Christians, and grow in strength in him, all sons of God, in the imperative. Grow in strength in him by reading his word and doing his will. For the blood of his sons he shall avenge. Now, Christians obviously here can be killed. And he shall avenge and recompense punishment to the enemies. And to the ones detesting him he will recompense. A recompense is an interesting word because it depends on a person's actions. If a person is doing something good, they can get a reward for doing good. If a person is doing bad, they can be punished. But a recompense can go either way. It depends on the actions that surround the recompense. Ones detesting him is a recompense. A recompense to the ones loving him is something good. And the Lord shall clear out the land for his people. Now, I believe this is in a future time. Possibly the last 10 chapters of Ezekiel talks about it. Excuse me. And Moses wrote this ode in that day. So it was written by Moses. And he taught it to the sons of Israel. So this is a big thing. Teaches the sons of Israel. And Moses approached and spoke all the words of this law into the ears of the people, he and Joshua the son of Nun. So this was a big thing. Now, I don't see it being done at all today. And Moses completed speaking. Oh, still not getting that. No, see if that did it. These words to all Israel. And he said to them, You take heed in your heart over all these words which I testify to you today, which you shall charge to your sons to guard and to do all the words of this law. Now, the law, and he's talking about the law, and I don't think he's talking about the ode right here, but still, they are to guard it. For this word is not an empty word for you, for this is your life. The laws will protect a person. This is what laws are for, to protect people. It's not just to make your life miserable, although some laws we look at and think, well, that's exactly what they were designed to do, but not with God's laws. His laws were for our good. For these people here, especially the laws of Moses, Jesus brought a new law for loving our neighbors, loving God, so forth, and forgiving each other. And because of this word, you shall prolong your days upon the land into which you pass over the Jordan there to inherit it. So now he's reciting again the laws and the good things when they're going to go across, which they're getting ready to do. And the Lord spoke to Moses in this day, saying, Ascend into the Oros, Avarim, this Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, to the cross the Jordan to the east of Jericho. I should have put a map up. Against the face of Jericho. And behold, the land of Canaan. He means look at the land of Canaan, which I give to the sons of Israel for a possession. Look at it when you get up to the top. And come to an end in the mountain into which you ascend there. Come to an end. Die. That's where you're going to die. And be added to your people, in which manner Aaron, your brother, died in Mount Hor, the mountain, over by Edom, I believe, and was added to his people. For you resisted persuasion to my word among the sons of Israel at the water of dispute, Kadesh, in the wilderness of Sin. For you did not sanctify me among the sons of Israel. Instead of telling the rock, speaking to the rock, he struck the rock, and then he blamed the people, and God said, now for that you can't go in. This is all in Numbers chapter 20, starting at the first verse. For you shall see the land before you, and you shall not enter there into the land which I give to the sons of Israel. Now, it's been pointed out by the pastor of the church I went to that he did actually go into the land, because when Jesus went up on the mountain, Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appeared to him on the mountain. So that was in Israel. So Moses came in, he says, by the back door. I thought it was pretty funny. Comes in by the back door, the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. But Moses, we'll find out now in the next chapter about his decease, with all the things that happen. So, till next time, God bless. Hope you'll join us in chapter 34.